Love addiction is when you get high on love beyond lust and attraction in early stages of dating. This obsession takes over your body, your mind, your entire life, and you feel euphoric when they text, only to crash into anxiety the moment they pull away. You know in your mind it's unhealthy, but there's something in you, in your heart, that means you just can't walk away. This isn't just in your head. Love addiction is wired into your body, and today I'll explain this and why, if you've ever felt addicted in love, it's not because you're weak or desperate. It's because your nervous system is hooked on the emotional highs and lows of inconsistent love, like a slot machine. If you want to get to the bottom of why your mind and heart are just so out of alignment in romantic relationships, this video will be a game changer for you, because I'll also explain how to break free of love addiction and rewire yourself so you don't use love as a dopamine escape, but it becomes a healthy, stable, and secure outlet for you. Like my client Joni, who was stuck in love addiction for years with a partner who eventually became a friend that she was still stuck in this addiction with. He shined a light on her shadows and triggered her deeply, but no amount of therapy or work could heal her love addiction until she learned how to dive deep into the core wounds that live in her body that caused the love addiction, so that she could release that trauma and let go of her attachment to him. A few months later, they had a phone call together, and she felt zero dopamine hit or relief from their contact, and she was finally free and knows with certainty that she will always choose herself. So love addiction, or limerence as it's also called, is categorized as an addiction because of the neurobiological process the brain undergoes with the limerent object, the object of your interest, which is the person that you are in love with or addicted to. Just like other addictions, you can be more prone to love addiction if you always need to be in love, right? You're always in some kind of relationship, or you idolize the concept of love as a fantasy. Disney films and fantasy movies train your mind to be wired to use love in a way that produces excess dopamine that then soothes and calms you. And as long as you have a limerent object and are in love, you feel calm, safe, and secure. My earliest memories are of imagining a knight in shining armor to come and rescue me as a little girl. I'd even fall asleep with that expression of just being ready to be kissed, you know? Then when puberty hit, I learned how to play out those fantasy narratives with actual boys. I'd find myself getting hooked on the chase of getting a boy to be interested in me, and it consumed my mind and body. And if we actually ended up in relationship, it was short-lived. And the breakup, the crushing feelings of being rejected, again brought me this chemical release in a more masochistic way, because even though we'd broken up, I was still connected to him because of that rejection. So as long as I kept playing out possible scenarios of reconciliation, I'd have hope, and that dopamine would still come through for me. But why do we actually learn to do this? Using fantasy and dopamine in this way is a response to growing up in an unsafe childhood environment and experiencing trauma, either capital or little t trauma on the outside. The real trauma, though, is what happens on the inside of you as a result of that external situation. And you didn't have a healthy way to process it, so you learned a maladaptive strategy by placing your healing in the hands of a fantasy person, the limerent object. So for me, what caused my trauma was a chaotic family household with emotionally unavailable parents where I just didn't get enough connection and safety from them. So I sought it elsewhere in these fantasy stories in my mind, and found great strength and inspiration in the dopamine I could produce on demand inside my body. I had a whole lot of little habits. One boyfriend I remember had sent me a handwritten note asking to be my boyfriend, with like a box for yes and a box for no to tick. And I ticked yes, and I held onto that note, and I looked at it every night before I went to sleep. We never actually talked much, and we rarely held hands or hung out. That entire relationship existed in my mind, and it was fed through that nightly ritual of taking out that little note, gazing upon it adoringly, and just replaying all the memories I'd collected up until that point of our fleeting moments of connection at school. I was 14, and I was in the throes of early stage love addiction. Now, some people grow out of that. Some people would say that that's pretty normal for a 14-year-old. But for me, my love addiction grew and grew. As I became an adult, my internal world became more wired to seek out a limerent object to crave. And I'd hook on any guy that would throw some interest my way. And I'd play out the drama and intrigue purely in my mind of either euphoria or withdrawal. With him sometimes having little to no idea, I even had feelings for him. Now, a key aspect of a limerent object is a person who cannot return your interest. It is unrequited love. Love addiction cannot exist when there is reciprocation from your limerent object. It just simply can't exist, because love addiction is not addiction to love, but it's actually addiction to the inconsistency and uncertainty and unpredictability of the connection. Because the dopamine high intensifies the more inconsistent that connection is. So if you're connected to your partner all the time, the brain doesn't give you nearly as much dopamine as if you're connected sometimes and other times you're being rejected. And this becomes the roller coaster that you get absolutely hooked on, and where the highest of high dopamine hits you'll ever experience come when it comes to romantic love. Now, this level of dopamine is associated to be on par with the use of cocaine or alcohol. And there's science behind this connection. A study from the University of California, San Francisco, published in Science back in 2012, and it found that male fruit flies who got rejected drank 4 times more alcohol than those who successfully made it, getting that dopamine high. Now, as the professor in charge put it, it's the same reward center, just a different way to get there. You might not be drinking or taking drugs, but you are using your imagination to produce the same chemical effect. Now, as someone who's healed her love addiction, I can tell you that SLAA and talk therapy won't actually get to the root of the trauma that spurs on the behavior of seeking dopamine to self-soothe, because the trauma that causes the pathways of love addiction to form lives in the body, not in the mind. The behavior might be a habit that's been rewarded enough times that you're hooked in this pattern of seeking dopamine through love addiction, but the root cause comes from deep feelings of unworthiness, abandonment, and loneliness. And those emotions and scars live energetically in your body. You cannot talk your way out of love addiction. You cannot rewire the way you think with affirmations and mantras. You have to feel and release the trapped emotional energy that caused you to start the behavior of love addiction in the first place. Now, how do we do this? I teach my clients this through a process called RAIN that I want to teach you now. So RAIN is an acronym. It stands for Recognize, Allow, Investigate, and Nurture. The first thing you're going to do with RAIN is you're going to become aware of your nervous system. Fluctuations during the day are really natural. We go through states of parasympathetic when we're in rest and digest, and sympathetic where we're a little bit activated and aroused. And when you're in love addiction, you are in a hyper aroused state. It's actually anxiety that you're in, and it's actually fight that you're in. Love addiction is a moving towards energy where you're wanting to grasp onto someone. So notice when you get stuck on in your body, and notice what's actually going on somatically for you. And possibly you've been stuck on in this state for a long time. So maybe you are in a chronic state of fight, flight, and you need to lean into moments and instances where you feel more relaxed and you're more in your parasympathetic. Once you start to become a little more aware of your nervous system, instead of running that usual pattern where you will go into a limerent fantasy about your object, which is effectively fleeing from any kind of discomfort or emotion that's coming up in your body, or a way of dissociating. You might also like to watch lots of Netflix or eat lots of food. I want you to do this RAIN practice first. Just before you do the behavior, I want you to start by recognizing the presence of something inside of you that is uncomfortable, that you're trying to cover over with this addictive behavior, thinking about him or whatever other behaviors you have. There is something emotionally in there you're trying to get away from that's coming up. And I want you to see that emotion as one part of you, but not the whole part of you, right? There are other parts and other aspects to your personality that don't exist in this love addiction land. And so knowing that this is just one part that's coming up can give us a bit of space. space. So in your mind, I want you to imagine that you see this love addicted part inside of you in front of you, that you're visiting with it, right? And that you want to get to know it more better. I want you to actually imagine it as a small, fragile, afraid, naive little girl, okay? So that's the recognizing part. Then you're going to allow this part to be here, this little girl. Say things to her like, thank you for being here. Thank you for protecting me. Thank you for caring and for loving me. I'm here for you. I'm listening. You want to allow this part to feel fully seen and heard and acknowledged, because she didn't feel that way when the first trauma happened, right? She had to suppress and push things down and find maladaptive behaviors to help her go through what was happening for her. And that's what turned into love addiction. So we've got to give her as much space as you possibly can. Go so far as to identify what she believes she's trying to do, which is probably she thinks she's trying to keep you safe by going into this fantasy limerent state. And if you get triggered and notice real extreme discomfort in your body, like some kind of tension that needs to be released, allow yourself to lean into the discomfort a little bit before you go into your limerent behavior or whatever other dissociation behaviors. Just start with the edges to begin with. This isn't going to happen 100% the very first time. We've kind of got to lean into it and just do 1% every time we catch ourselves before the behavior happens. So imagine the trauma that's causing you to go into love addiction is a huge ball of emotional energy within you. Just visualize touching the edges of it and getting a sense of what it's about. Notice how much you can tolerate of feeling it before you get overwhelmed and shut down and go into the behavior. Whilst you're touching the edges of it, you're going to drop into the body and investigate what somatic sensations are coming up. Because often when we start to touch the edges of these kinds of traumas, there are some emotions that start to shift and move that have been trapped in the body, and they come out as tension in the throat or heat in the chest, or maybe this kind of sinking feeling in the gut. So particularly just before you start to have thoughts of your limerent person, I want you to notice whether your nervous system is getting aroused, right? Maybe your heart is beating faster or rapid, or you've got shallow breathing, or maybe you're feeling nervous or fidgety or stressed and on edge. I know that was my chronic state most of the time, this full-bodied tension. And I didn't even realize that people don't live like that normally. They're normally in this really relaxed state. So get more self-aware of what's actually going on for your body. Investigate in and notice where there are patterns and places of tension and pain. Maybe you have this kind of tunnel vision and heightened focus that so wants to think about this person in your mind and just kind of wants to keep hammering home thoughts obsessively. This is all signs that you're in this kind of fight-flight state. Dry mouth, nausea, butterflies in the stomach. This is your body preparing you for effective fight-flight, which is what's going on with your love addiction. Once you've become more aware of what's going on somatically in your body just before you go into that behavior, or maybe you're in that behavior and you're also able to sit with your body somatically, I want you to ask one of those sensations these following questions. What do you need me to know right now? What do you need to feel safe in this moment? What do you need to feel loved by me in this moment? This part of you is trying to get love from the limerent object by using this fantasy movie screen inside of you. But what we've got to do is actually give it our love. Ask it how it needs to feel loved by you, not from an external place. Track this sensation as much as you can. And if you get to a point where you're able to release the emotion by crying, and the crying feels good and you do feel relief, you've done a great job. You've cleared some of that emotional trauma. If you notice you get worse and you feel like you're kind of spiraling down and getting worse and worse, you need to stop immediately. This is something that you will need to do with a coach or therapist. The last piece of RAIN is the most important piece. It is the nurture piece. And this is where we learn to connect with the original wound that's causing our love addiction. and allowing this wound to actually feel like it belongs, that it is loved. Because this is a relational trauma, what happened to cause your love addiction happened in a relationship earlier on. It didn't happen when you were in a vacuum. It has to be healed in relationship to someone. So when you are on your own, and I talk mostly about self-healing on this channel, you can connect with those other parts of yourself I mentioned before. So this wound, this part inside of you, can feel a lot of love and belonging by your higher self, which is the person that's actually asking the questions when you ask, what do you need to feel loved? What do you need to feel safe? So in the nurture step, you are going to give so much love to this part. You're going to imagine it as that young, vulnerable, afraid child within you that just deeply needs comfort and safety. Visualize that young part in front of you, ask what it needs and give it that. Is it a hug, or just some affection, or just looking into her eyes, or just to hear her speak? What is it in your mind's eye? This might seem a bit strange and a bit unusual, but you will have images and you will have some kind of words or data that come up when you ask your wounds this. And while you're doing this, I want you to sense your nervous system, because we're trying to co-regulate and calm down and soothe our wound. I want you to make sure there's some level of safety in the body. So focusing on your breathing, focusing on your self-soothing. So this process will heal the energy beneath the love addiction. But it is not simply sometimes a process that we can just do from watching a YouTube video. So this is the work that I do with my clients inside Heal Your Heart School. I would love to show you how to do this, to bring you in. But the first thing we need to do is get on a call together to see if we are actually a fit to work together. And you can do that by booking a call with me in the link below. In the meantime, here are some next step videos for you to watch to keep healing the wounds that hold you back from having healthy relationships, so that you can ultimately have the most beautiful relationship with yourself. And for now, I will see you in the next video.